You may think being a samurai was all honor and glory, but the truth is far from it. Welcome to Sleepless Mysteries, where we gently peel back the layers of history, one quiet story at a time. Before we begin, what time are you listening to this? Midnight? 3 a.m.? Maybe 9 in the evening? Whatever it is, comment it down below. I would love to know when your eyes get heavy and your mind begins to drift, and allow yourself to sink gently into the strange and quiet world of the samurai. Now, get comfortable, let your muscles soften, let your breathing slow. The path to becoming a samurai was not paved with grace or ceremony. It was a long and often painful process that began in childhood. While many imagine young boys dressed in silk robes, learning swordplay in quiet gardens, the truth was much harsher. Samurai training began around the age of 5 or 6. From the moment a child was selected to walk this path, their life was no longer their own. Play was a luxury. Emotions were weaknesses, and failure was met not with patience, but with punishment. These children were often woken before sunrise. Their days started with cold water thrown over their heads, no matter the season. Winter mornings stung like needles. The water was meant to shock the body into alertness, to toughen the spirit. Shivering, teeth chattering, the child was then expected to sit in silent meditation. If he moved even slightly, he would be beaten with a bamboo cane. After meditation came the sword drills, not with wooden toys or padded gear, but with real blades or hard wooden swords that could crack bone. Repetition was endless. The same strike practiced over and over until arms ached, until fingers blistered, until legs could no longer hold the weight of the stance. Mistakes were not tolerated. If the sword was too slow, the boy would be slapped. If the footwork was sloppy, he would be forced to kneel on gravel or broken tile for hours. Pain was a teacher. Pain was the only reward. But it did not stop at the body. The mind, too, was subjected to extreme pressure. Young samurai were told not to fear death, not to cry, not to beg, not to complain. Their parents and masters reminded them often that honor was more important than life itself. The lesson was clear. You were captured in battle. You must take your own life. You failed your lord. You must take your own life. Even if you brought shame to your family, the answer was still the same. Seppuku, ritual suicide, was introduced to them young. They were shown how to cut open their belly, how to do it cleanly and with dignity. It was not an abstract idea. It was real, it was practiced, and it was expected. Outside of the dojo, the training continued. Samurai boys were sometimes left in the woods overnight to survive alone. They were tasked with hunting small animals, building fires, finding shelter, all in complete silence. If they returned without injuries or lessons, their masters would assume they had cheated. Punishment would follow. Even food was used as a tool of discipline. Meals were sparse and tasteless. Rice with a bit of broth, dried fish. Nothing more. Hunger was seen as a test of spirit. Complaining about food was dishonorable. Enjoying it too much was indulgent. The goal was to control the senses, to be immune to pleasure and pain alike. If a child broke under this pressure, there was no rescue. Parents did not interfere. Sympathy was discouraged. Those who could not withstand the training were dismissed, or worse, forced to serve those who could. To be a failed samurai was shameful, not just for the boy, but for his entire family. Those who endured, who kept silent through pain, who showed no fear when cut or beaten, were praised. Not with hugs or warmth, but with nods of approval or slightly better rations. Emotional distance was the norm. The only affection allowed was that between warrior and sword. By the age of 12, most samurai in training were already skilled with a blade. They had practiced mounted archery, horseback riding, hand-to-hand combat, and even battlefield tactics, but they had no childhood, no softness, no rest. Some were sent into real combat before they turned 15. Forced to watch men die, forced to kill with their own hands. This was their graduation. What made it worse was the constant fear of failing their masters. A single mistake could cost everything. One misstep in battle, one moment of disobedience, and they could be ordered to perform seppuku to preserve family honor. And yet, through all of this, they were told to remain calm, still, graceful, to show no emotion, to walk with elegance, to write poetry, to paint, to memorize classic texts. The contradiction was brutal. They were both killers and scholars, gentle and savage, proud and obedient, always walking a tightrope of expectations that bent the soul until it cracked. Many samurai died before they reached adulthood, some from infections caused by wounds, others from exhaustion, and many by their own hand, driven by the unbearable pressure of honor. So when we think of the samurai as noble warriors, dressed in ornate armor, standing tall in the sun with their swords gleaming, we must remember what it cost to become that image. The long nights, the bleeding fingers, the broken childhood. It was a path of strength, but it was also a path of suffering, a life spent suppressing humanity in favor of perfection, a life where pain was a teacher and death was always waiting just off stage. Close your eyes now. Picture a small boy kneeling in the cold, a sword too large for his hands, eyes burning with fatigue. Still, he swings, again and again, because to stop is to fail, and to fail is unthinkable. Let that image drift quietly in your mind as your breathing slows, as your body grows heavier, and as you sink deeper into stillness. Let sleep come gently. The story will continue when you are ready. When you picture a samurai, perhaps you imagine shimmering armor, layers of lacquered plates catching the morning sun, with ribbons fluttering and a proud warrior standing tall. But wearing that armor was not noble. It was not elegant. It was a burden that shaped the body, crushed the spine, and demanded a constant sacrifice of comfort and freedom. A full suit of samurai armor was heavy, not just in weight, but in sensation. On average, it weighed over 60 pounds. Putting on a helmet at dawn could feel like lowering a block of frozen iron onto your head. Hands numbed, toes blackened, but complaints were not permitted. Ko's samurai was expected to remain still, no matter what discomfort he felt beneath the armor. That might not sound unbearable for a short time, but samurai could be expected to wear it for hours, sometimes days. From head to toe, every inch of the body was wrapped or shielded, but it was also suffocating. Its inner lining soaked with sweat, its fit often so tight it left bruises. Some warriors went deaf in one ear from the pressure. Others suffered migraines from the strain on their temples. Still, they wore it, because removing it in fear or discomfort was shameful. Mobility was a challenge. The knees ached from the weight. The shoulders burned from the constant pressure. The samurai allowed his gear to fall into disrepair. It reflected poorly on his honor. So after battle, even while injured or sick, he would sit silently and tend to the armor, wiping blood from the plates, placing broken cords, sleeping upright, tied to a tree or sitting cross-legged, hoping not to roll over and crush a limb under the weight. Their dreams were restless, their bodies always alert. The weight of the armor becomes a second skin that you can never remove. Even in dreams, you feel it pressing against you. The armor may have looked beautiful, but wearing it was a quiet suffering that never left. Still, they had to rise the next morning, unchanged in their discipline. The soft clinking of the cords, the creak of the chest plate, it meant another battle, another day of pain. And let the memory of the armor slip away as sleep draws near. Another moment where death might come, slowly or suddenly, but always silently beneath the armor, restoring shine to dull edges. Wearing the wrong emblem or forgetting to display it correctly could lead to disgrace. the world outside, muted by the weight on your shoulders. Let that feeling sink in, not with fear, but with quiet understanding. Some were forced to repaint armor by hand, using crushed minerals with tiny brushes for hours on end. It was meticulous and boring, but it had to be perfect. The helmet sometimes pressed against the face. Many warriors developed chronic neck and shoulder problems. Over time, their posture bent. Bones ached permanently. Samurai were trained to believe in honor more than survival. Your feet sinking into wet earth under 60 pounds of gear. The sun beating down, and ahead, dozens of enemies. You cannot turn, you cannot flee, you must fight or fall with honor. So even in full armor, they were expected to fight face, keys, no running, no hiding. If they were outnumbered, they fought anyway. Armor was there to preserve dignity, not life, which meant he could not afford to neglect it, even as it punished his body. But to show pain in public was to reveal weakness. The armor was made from dozens of small plates, bound together with silk cords. It offered protection, but it also trapped heat. In summer, it became a boiling chamber. Sweat poured down the body. The undergarments soaked through in minutes, and there was no relief. Removing armor during battle or in its lead-up was dishonorable. If the armor chafed, if it cut into the skin, that was simply something to endure. In winter, the metal turned ice cold. Breathing was a challenge. The chest was wrapped tightly, and then came the battles. Running in armor was slow and exhausting. Climbing hills, chasing enemies, even simply mounting a horse took twice as long when weighed down. And if a warrior fell, getting up was nearly impossible without help. Many samurai died not from wounds, but from being knocked over and trampled because they could not rise again. The helmet, or kabuto, was iconic. Armor was never just armor. It had to be maintained, cleaned, repaired. Each strap checked daily. It was said that a samurai's armor was an extension of his soul. Sleep in armor was nearly impossible, yet sometimes on long campaigns they had no choice. The armor was also symbolic. Its colors, patterns, family crests, all mattered. And, worst of all, armor did not guarantee safety. Imagine standing on a battlefield. Your vision blurred from sweat, your breathing shallow. Now, imagine doing this over and over, year after year, as your back begins to stoop, as your knees swell. Many samurai came to dread the sound of armor being strapped on. The stories we tell make it seem glorious, but those who lived it knew better. Close your eyes now. Picture yourself beneath that helmet, your vision narrowed, your breath shallow. Let your arms grow heavy. Let your chest rise and fall gently. The katana, elegant, curved, razor sharp. It is the symbol of the samurai, their pride, their soul. But what people forget is that this sword was not just a weapon. It was a responsibility that crushed the spirit just as often as it protected the body. It could never be touched by another without permission. It had to be kept clean, oiled, stored properly, and inspected often. If a samurai allowed his blade to rust or dull, it was considered a shameful reflection of his own spirit. Even a tiny chip on the edge could lead to punishment. To own a katana was to carry a sacred burden. These swords were not made quickly. Each one took months to forge, layer upon layer of steel, folded, hammered, heated, cooled, sharpened. It was said the soul of the swordsmith passed into the blade, ancient and strict. If a samurai drew his blade in public, it had to taste blood, the kind that creeps into your chest and never leaves. You know that if it is drawn, there is no going back. Every conversation is heavier, every gesture watched. One insult, one accidental nudge, and the consequences become irreversible. If a samurai was ordered to act as a second during another's suicide, it was his duty to cut off the dying man's head in one swift stroke. No hesitation, no error. If he failed to do it cleanly, the dying man would suffer. And the disgrace would fall on both, even by accident. If a dispute happened in a marketplace, and the sword was drawn but not used, it was a sign of weakness. When the chaos tightened, and it came down to one-on-one fights, then the sword was drawn. What followed was intimate, bloody, personal. Many were forced to cut down innocents, or even take their own life afterward, just to uphold their code. Others had to watch their masters die, knowing it was their turn next. The blade never forgets, and it never forgives. When a samurai was handed his sword, he was not just being armed. There was no distance, no detachment. And yet, you were expected to remain composed. You left it on a stand and walked barefoot into the forest, never to return. Not from shame, but from exhaustion. From the endless tension of having to be perfect, deadly, and disciplined all at once. He was being entrusted with the spirit of a weapon that demanded perfection. Every drop of blood, every oath whispered before a duel. Let that silence wrap around you now, not in fear, but in quiet stillness. Let the breath in your chest grow slow and steady, and feel the edge of wakefulness dull, like an old sword returned to its stand. The katana had to be treated with reverence. Carefully, every bit of blood wiped away with rice paper. The blade roiled, the edge checked. The weight of the katana was not just on the hip, it was in the chest, a sharpness that never dulled. But all samurai knew one truth. The katana was never just a weapon. It was a judge, a symbol, a shadow that followed them until their last breath, while the body still trembled from what it had done. Samurai practiced for hours every day, not just how to swing, but how to draw, how to sheath, how to position the hips, the feet, the hands. It's one wrong motion, and the blade might catch on the scabbard. In battle, that tiny moment meant death, but the pressure went deeper. A samurai was trained to use the katana, not just in battle, but in daily life. It had to be within reach at all times, even while sleeping, even while bathing. To be caught unarmed was disgraceful, so they carried it always, a constant reminder of danger and duty. Drawing the blade was an art form. The motion had to be smooth, fast, exact. And what if they drew it in anger? There were rules. The katana could not be used recklessly, but it also could not be dishonored. This impossible balance led to fear, quiet fear. Imagine walking into a room, your blade at your side. Then there's the act of killing. The katana was not just for battle. It was also used for execution, for ritual seppuku. That kind of responsibility changes a man. Some samurai had to kill their friends. In war, the katana was used only in close combat, after arrows had been fired, after spears had clashed. You could feel your opponent's breath, hear the grunt of their pain. Watch their eyes widen in the moment of death. When the battle ended, the katana had to be cleaned. And what of the mind? Many samurais were haunted. They did not speak of it, but they felt it in their dreams, in the silence of the dojo. There were stories of men who refused to draw their blade in old age. Some treated the sword as a companion, others feared it. Some prayed to it, others cursed it. Now, close your eyes. Picture the blade resting silently in its sheath, cool, polished, perfect, and yet it remembers every battle. Let your limbs soften. Sleep is near. The sword will wait. When you imagine a samurai, perhaps you picture a loyal warrior returning home to a warm fire, a faithful wife waiting quietly, and children bowing with respect. But that version is a fantasy. In truth, love had no place in the life of a samurai. There was duty, there was loyalty, There was sacrifice, but there was rarely affection. Alliances, land, favor with a more powerful clan. The woman's feelings did not matter. The man's did not either. They were paired like pieces on a board placed where they would bring the most advantage. From the very beginning, samurai were taught that emotion was dangerous. A warrior ruled by feeling was weak. Whether it was fear in battle or tenderness at home, it was to be silenced. A samurai's life was divided between training, service, and war. Something hidden in glances, in fleeting moments, in stolen letters that could never be read aloud. Their affection had no place in their world. To express it was to risk it being taken away. The ink on the page was often the only place where emotion could breathe. A poem about cherry blossoms falling about a distant mountain scene in winter was really a way of saying, I am tired. I am afraid. I miss someone I cannot name. He spent much of his time away from home, on the road, in battle, at his master's estate. His wife remained behind, managing the household, raising the children, and praying he would return with honor. Not at all. Any desire for love or comfort had to be buried beneath layers of discipline and control. Their wives, if still alive, had grown used to silence. Their children had become warriors themselves, or married off into other families. The house was quiet, but not peaceful. He looks out the window at the falling snow. Kay hears his child's voice in the next room, but he does not rise. He remains still, because stillness is what he was taught. Stillness is what is expected. It was heavy with everything that had never been said. Let your thoughts soften like snow on a rooftop. No need to hold them tightly. No need to chase them. A samurai father had to be strict, distant. He did not hold his children. He did not play with them. He trained them, judged them, expected them to live without complaint, just as he had. He would nod, and that was the beginning of a lifelong contract. Not a romance, not a companionship, but a duty. But behind that armor was a heart that longed to beat freely, that wished it could speak without fear, that wanted to hold someone's hand without shame. She was a tool to be married off for gain. They wrote letters to their wives. They tried to raise their children with kindness. They carved little wooden toys or planted gardens with their own hands. But these acts were done quietly, in private, because in public, they were still expected to be stoned. Love was a luxury, and the samurai had no space for luxuries. Marriages were rarely chosen. They were arranged by families or feudal lords. The goal was not happiness, but strategy. A samurai might not even meet his future wife until the wedding day. She would bow, then discipline, then silence. There was no line in the code for love, no line for laughter, no space for the soft moments that make life feel warm and human. There was no room for love poems or long conversations, no hand-holding or laughter by moonlight. Affairs with lower-class women or court entertainers happened in secret. Discovered, the punishment was often seppuku ritual suicide. Even a whisper of dishonor could be fatal. If a samurai died in battle, his widow was expected to take it with grace. Tears were permitted briefly, but too much mourning was frowned upon. Her focus had to shift to the family's honor, to keeping appearances. Some women chose to take their own lives after their husband asked death, either out of devotion or to escape the shame of being alone. Love affairs were not unheard of, but they were risky. A samurai caught in a scandal could lose everything. For those who did fall in love, it became a silent ache. And yet, the loneliness grew. Many samurai wrote poetry not to express joy, but to quietly release sorrow. Children offered no relief. They were not raised with affection. His son was not his boy. He was his successor. His daughter was not his little girl. Even in old age, samurai found no comfort. Those who survived long enough to retire were often alone. The code of Bushido, what many call the way of the warrior, was clear. Loyalty to one's lord, came first, then loyalty to one's family name. Some samurai tried to rebel against this. It is easy to admire their strength, their control, their unwavering loyalty. Close your eyes. Picture a samurai sitting alone in the corner of a quiet room, his armor polished, his sword resting by his side. Let that image fade into the quiet of your own breath. The samurai knew the cost of love. You do not have to pay it now. Let sleep find you in the spaces where they could not speak. To be a samurai was not just to serve a lord or wield a blade. It was to walk through life on the edge of disgrace. Every word, every gesture, every decision weighed not by kindness or logic, but by an ancient and brutal code. The code of Bushido demanded more than bravery. It demanded absolute control, complete obedience, and a readiness to die at any moment. Not for yourself, but for reputation, for honor, for something invisible and impossible to measure. Dishonor could come from anywhere, from things you did or things you failed to do, from words you said or ones you did not say. Even the tone of your silence could be dangerous. There were no second chances, no understanding, no time to explain, but the standing of your family, your children, your ancestors, all stained by a single mistake. Imagine waking each day knowing a misstep, even a small one, could cost you your life. And not just your life. The fear never left, not even in sleep. A samurai who spoke too boldly to a superior could be ordered to commit seppuku, slicing open his own stomach with a short blade, kneeling in white robes, bowing deeply before dying in agony, all because of one misjudged word. Failure in battle was no better. Even if you survived, if you failed to protect your master, or if your strategy faltered, you would be expected to take your life to cleanse the shame. And if you hesitated, others might be forced to do it for you, to protect your clan's name. Dishonor was a shadow, always watching, always waiting. It did not care if you were tired, or wounded, or confused. It only cared if you were perfect. There were samurai who lived for years in fear of old mistakes catching up to them. A letter lost, a debt unpaid, a rumor whispered by an enemy. All it took was one lord hearing the wrong thing. Some tried to escape it. They left their swords at temples. Teas, they wandered into the mountains. But even in solitude, dishonor followed them. You could not hide from a code written into your blood. Even death was not a guaranteed escape. If you died poorly, if your final words were not dignified, if your posture failed in the moment of seppuku, shame would still cling to your name. Children would suffer for the disgrace of their father. Wives cast out, homes burned, generations taunted by a single moment of imperfection. And so the samurai lived in quiet dread, bowing perfectly, speaking carefully, always watching the room, gauging every reaction, reading every silence. Their smiles were measured, their joy restrained, their grief hidden. Even kindness could be dangerous. Show too much mercy and you risk being seen as soft, as lacking discipline. So they stood still. Even when they wanted to fall to their knees, they bowed. Even when their hearts begged to shout, picked. Even when they longed to forgive. Now, close your eyes. Picture a samurai, standing before a low table, the blade before him gleaming under candlelight. The silence so complete it roars. He is not dying for love, or for glory, but for rules older than memory. For a code that never bent, never listened, only demanded. Let your breath match his silence. Let the weight of his burden fade into the quiet between your thoughts. Sleep now, where there are no codes, no mistakes, no shadows watching, only peace, only stillness, only rest. The life of a samurai was built on war, not the kind sung about in poems, but the kind that bled into every season, that never ended, only shifted. Japan's feudal era was not a time of peace. It was an age of near constant fighting, between clans, between families, between men who once dined together and now faced each other across muddy fields. A samurai was never truly at rest. Even during times when the swords were sheathed, he trained for the next conflict, because it was never a matter of if, only when. There were years where a man might be summoned to battle dozens of times, sometimes for a siege, sometimes for a skirmish in the forest, sometimes just to defend a border from a neighbor hungry for more land. These wars were not noble, they were brutal. Messi often fought over insults or inheritance or shifting alliances no warrior could control. A samurai did not choose which war to fight. His lord chose for him, and refusal was not an option. To disobey was to die in disgrace, or worse, to bring shame to one's entire household. The travel alone was exhausting, marching for days in the rain, sleeping in the mud, armor clinging like cold vines, rations reduced to stale rice and dried fish, bodies aching, spirits numb, and when battle came, it was chaos. Arrows darkened the sky, men screamed, blood sprayed from fresh wounds, limbs were severed, friends died in the mud without final words. The stench was overwhelming, sweat, steel, death, all baked into the sun or frozen into winter ground. There was no time to mourn. A samurai might kill a man in the morning, then share a quiet meal beside his corpse by evening. Each victory brought more violence, more responsibility, more weight. For every war that ended, another waited, another lord rose, another border shifted, another grudge needed blood to settle it. Peace was a whisper, short-lived and quickly drowned by the roar of fresh conflict. Even during brief moments of quiet, the samurai could not relax. His sword remained at his side, armor polished, horse ready, mind sharpened for the moment when duty would call again. His family never knew if he would return, and he never knew if his final battle was already behind him or just one sunrise away. And if he did return, it was not always with pride. Some came home broken, their limbs twisted by injury, their eyes vacant, unable to speak of what they had seen, what they had done. The world they fought for rarely rewarded them. Many lords saw their warriors as tools, once used, often discarded. Some were promised land or gold, only to be given silence and forgotten after the war. Others found themselves at the mercy of shifting alliances, one day honored, the next hunted, forced to choose between loyalty and survival. Even those who rose in power were not free. Their victories only brought more wars, more enemies, more blood that needed spilling. So the cycle turned. Again and again there was no end, no final battle, no last stand that brought peace. Only more marching, more fighting, more funerals with no bodies to bury. Even the strongest samurai grew tired, not just in their bones, but in their spirit. They began to ask questions they were not allowed to speak aloud. Why do we keep fighting? What are we dying for? Who truly benefits from this endless chain of death? But such thoughts were dangerous. They had no place in the heart of a warrior, and so they were buried deep beneath the layers of steel and silence. Now, close your eyes. Picture a samurai on a distant hilltop, his sword sheathed, his armor dusted with ash. He looks out over a valley filled with smoke, the cries of battle fading behind him. He does not smile, he does not cry. He simply stands, waiting for the next call, knowing it will come, knowing it always does. Let that image dissolve slowly, like mist rising from the earth. Let your breathing match the rhythm of distant drums no longer beating. The wars are over for tonight. Your body does not need to march. Your heart does not need to carry a blade. Sleep now, while the battlefield is still. For the samurai, loyalty was not a choice, it was a sentence. From the moment a man became a samurai, his life no longer belonged to himself. It belonged to his lord, his daimyo, his master in all things both seen and unseen. If a command came, no matter how senseless or cruel, it had to be followed. If the Lord wanted a rival assassinated under cover of night, the samurai went. If the Lord demanded that prisoners be executed without trial, the samurai obeyed. If the Lord wished for his own wife or child to be punished, the samurai carried out the act with bowed head and steady hand. The bond between a samurai and his lord was expected to be absolute, total, and changing until death and beyond. And yet, this loyalty was not always rewarded. In fact, it was often twisted, deduced. A samurai did not question orders. He did not ask for explanations. Men who had served faithfully for decades, who had fought in wars, bled for their clan only to be forced to commit seppuku after hesitating to follow one strange order. The reason never mattered. The hesitation alone was enough. Even when the command went against a samurai's conscience, his beliefs, his soul, he obeyed. And if he didn't, he died. You could be born under one master and raised under another. The tides of power shifted constantly, and each new tide brought its own demands. Slowly, quietly, year after year, there were stories passed from village to village quietly about samurai who disobeyed. His voice was used only to recite oaths or offer final words before death. Imagine living every day knowing that your death could be ordered not for a crime, but for a pause, a moment of thought, a flicker of humanity. The more powerful the lord, the more dangerous the loyalty. Some daimyo were wise, measured, honorable. Kana, others were paranoid, reckless, cruel, and the samurai had no say in which they served. You might be told to spy on your friends, to betray your allies, to carry out a secret mission, and then pretend you had not. You might be forced to give up your Lenore family, your homo, for the honor of your lord's name. Refusing to perform junshi brought shame on the samurai's family, sometimes punishment from the new ruling lord. The most loyal samurai were often asked to prove it in the worst ways. Some were ordered to test new swords on prisoners. Others were told to burn entire villages to send a message, and still they bowed and obeyed. This was not loyalty born of respect. It was loyalty born of fear, of duty, of a belief that a samurai's purpose was to serve without question, but it came at a cost. The self began to erode. A samurai stopped making decisions, stopped dreaming, stopped hoping. His thoughts belonged to his master. His hands moved only when commanded. This vanished into the mountains, becoming ghosts in bamboo forests, haunting old temples, muttering to no one. He became a vessel, a shell of iron and silence. And what happened when the Lord died? Loyalty did not end. In many cases, samurai were expected to follow their master into death. This was known as junshi, the act of ritual suicide, to accompany one's lord into the afterlife. A man who had lost his purpose and, therefore, his right to live. Even if the lord had died of natural causes, if he had been cruel or dishonorable, the samurai was expected to end his life out of devotion. Imagine living through countless battles, enduring pain and fear, and then, one morning, your master passes away in a sleep, and you are told to kneel, prepare your blade, and join him in death. It was not optional. He was forced to carry out acts that stole pieces of his soul bit by bit until there was almost nothing left. Entire groups of samurai have taken their lives in mass acts of loyalty cutting. Their stomachs open in perfect silence, dressed in white, surrounded by ceremonial incense, because their master's life had ended. Their stories are remembered as noble, but their suffering, deep, cold lifelong, is often forgotten. Around him cherry blossoms fall gently through the air, pink and white and silent. And even if a samurai was not forced to die, life without a master was empty. He became a ronin, wandering warrior, with no home, no purpose, no place in society. Some ronin tried to find new lords. Most were turned away. A masterless samurai was seen as untrustworthy, diminished, doseless. Others became mercenaries, bodyguards, bandits. Many drank themselves into madness. The name ronin once meant wave man, a soul drifting like a wave across the sea with no anchor, no shore. It was a lonely life, but some found a strange freedom in it. A few chose to remain masterless, walking from village to village, foraging, poetry teaching children the way of the sword, not as a tool of war but of disciplined balance piece. These were rare, and often shunned, because to the rest of the world, samurai without a lord was broken, a failure. All of this woven into the life of a samurai. From the outside, he looked strong, disciplined, unshakable, but inside, he was often torn, used, bound to people he did not choose. Now, close your eyes. Picture a samurai standing beside his master's grave, his hands folded, his head bowed. He is alone. Though others pass by, they do not speak. His master is gone. His orders are gone. His path is gone. All that remains is the cold weight of duty and the emptiness it leaves behind. Let that image soften into the quiet around you. Let the cherry blossoms fall, slower, slower, still till they become part of your breath. You are not bound tonight. No oaths to follow, no orders to obey, no masters to serve. Just the stillness, just the peace, just sleep. No image of the samurai is more haunting, more still than the act of seppuku. It was the final expression of honor, the ultimate sacrifice. The moment when the samurai proved loyalty, not through words, not through battle, but by offering his own life, by his own blade. To outsiders, it may appear noble or poetic, but to the samurai, it was neither romantic nor graceful. It was expected, it was feared, it was taught. From a young age, samurai boys were shown how to kneel, how to tie the white robes, how to place the blade before them, not just in theory, but in practice, because they had to be ready. It's always ready to die the right way. Seppuku was not suicide in the way we understand it today. It was ritualized death, performance of suffering, a display of resolve that proved a man had dignity, even in failure, who watched to see if the samurai would flinch, if he would scream, if he would beg. It was not done in private. It was done in front of witnesses, often an audience of lords, soldiers, even enemies. He was expected to do none of those things. He would sit on his knees, spine straight, breath calm, hands steady. Before him, a blade, sometimes his short sword, sometimes a special dagger given for the task beside him. His second, a trusted comrade, is tasked with ending the pain at the right moment by slicing cleanly through the neck, just after the belly was opened. Timing mattered too soon, and the ritual was incomplete. Too late, and the samurai would suffer needlessly, his screams forever tarnishing his name. His robes placed the blade at the left side of his abdomen, cut across, and then upward. The act itself was precise. He would lift. The pain was indescribable. Organs sliced, muscles torn, blood pouring onto the floor. And through it all, he had to remain calm, composed, dignified. There were samurai who managed to do this in silence, who bowed even as their vision darkened. There were others who trembled, wept, who hesitated, and were remembered only for their weakness, not their service. Seppuku was used for many reasons, not just personal shame. If a samurai failed in battle, he might be ordered to take his life. If his master died, he might be expected to follow. If he committed a crime, or insulted a superior, or simply fell out of favor, the blade waited. Sometimes lords used it to eliminate rivals, by giving them the illusion of honor. Take your life with dignity, they would say. But behind the words, there was no respect, only control. There were even samurai who volunteered to perform seppuku, because to live without honor was worse than death. We would write poems beforehand, called jizei, final verses of reflection. Some were beautiful, some were bitter, but all were soaked in quiet sorrow. Others had no time to write, no ceremony, just a blade in a room, and the end of everything they had known. And what of the families they left behind? Wives were expected to remain quiet, to understand. Children were told to be proud that their father had died with honor. But inside the home, the absence was vast, cold, spoken. A sword placed in a shrine did not replace a voice that had once whispered. Good night, a name carved into wood, did not bring warmth to a mother's hands. The samurai life was built on the idea that your body was not yours. It belonged to your master, to your code, to the generations before you. And if it needed to be broken, bled, buried, to preserve that system, then so be it. Even the samurai who lived in peace carried the knowledge that seppuku waited in the wings. One wrong step, one shift in politics, one word overheard, and it could be summoned. There were samurai who slept with their short blade within reach, just in case. There were those who could not eat without imagining the blade beside their rice bowl. The act became part of them, a shadow on their soul. And what about the seconds, the men chosen to end the ritual? Their task was no less heavy. They had to be swift, precise, merciful, but not too soon. They had to watch their friend, a brother in arms, cut himself open, and then wait for the exact moment to bring down the sword, not out of hate, but love. And they carried that memory forever. Some could never sleep again. Some broke their swords and vanished into exile. Some drank until the images dulled. It was an unspoken truth among the samurai, that the blade turned inward just as easily as it pointed forward, that sometimes the most dangerous enemy was not another warrior, but the silence inside. Imagine it now, a room lit by paper lanterns, tatami mats beneath the knees, a white robe folded perfectly, a blade resting on a low tray, and a man kneeling, eyes closed, breathing in what he knows is his final moment. He is not thinking of glory. He is not thinking of legacy. He is thinking of his child's face, of a laugh shared long ago, of a dream he once had, forgotten now, buried beneath years of discipline. But still, he grips the blade, because that is what he was taught, because that is what is expected, because there is no other path left. Now let that image soften, let the lanterns dim, let the blade vanish, let the room dissolve into mist. You are not bound by code tonight. There are no rituals here, no oaths to die for, no eyes watching, only the hush of your breath, the warmth of the bed beneath you, the quiet rhythm of a heart that does not need to fight. You are safe here. Let sleep find you, not in silence, but in peace. Let your thoughts grow gentle. Let your body loosen. Let go of the blade and drift, drift. For the samurai, there was always the fear that the world would move on without them, up through death and battle, but through something far slower, quieter, more painful, irrelevance. After generations of war, of endless loyalty, of steel and sacrifice, there came a time when the blade was no longer needed, when the lords settled their rivalries, when the land quieted, and the shogunate brought peace to Japan. To most people, peace was a blessing. To farmers, to merchants, to children, it meant safety, it meant stability. But to the samurai, peace meant something else. It's a slow erasure of everything they had lived for. They were warriors without war, servants without a battlefield, swordsmen with no one to strike their code remained. Their training remained. But the world had changed, and it no longer asked for their kind. At first, many samurai still served in administrative roles, helping govern towns, force order, act as bodyguards. But over time, even those duties were taken by others. Men without swords, men who had not bled. New systems were built. Laws replaced swords. Wealth replaced titles. And samurai found themselves trapped in a world that no longer honored the weight of their silence. Their stipends, the payments given to them by lords for their service, began to shrink, then disappear. Some were forced to sell their armor, their blades, the very symbols of their identity, just to survive. Imagine looking at your sword, once the pride of your household, once kissed by the blood of enemies, and knowing you must trade it for rice. But the students came less and less. The world did not need the way of the warrior anymore. It needed traders, clerks, politicians. Others tried to adapt, to become teachers, poets, monks, open schools, to train young men in the old ways. And so the samurai began to vanish, not all at once, but quietly, like shadows pulling away from the edge of morning. They became relics, stories, their names remembered in song, but their lives forgotten. The few who resisted, who clung to their swords and their honor, were seen as troublemakers. Some joined rebellions, refusing to lay down their blades, but they were crushed by modern armies, by guns and new tactics that made their centuries of discipline meaningless. Others wandered the country, ragged, silent eyes, sunken like ghosts, searching for a battlefield that no longer existed. They were no longer feared, they were pitied, and yet some still clung to the old ways. They continued to bow to empty thrones, to sharpen swords that would never strike, to recite codes that no one around them lived by anymore. They did this not because they hoped for change, but because they did not know any other way to live, of a world they no longer recognized. Loyalty had shaped every breath they took, every choice they made. It had filled their hearts like smoke, thick and choking. And even when the fire was gone, the smoke remained. There were samurai who died alone, in small huts, with no one to bow beside them, no one to close their eyes. Their final thoughts not of battle, but of confusion. They were not killed by enemies, but by time. Time had stripped them of purpose, of direction, of meaning. To fight was painful. To surrender was worse. And so they simply existed, in a slow descent, unnoticed, unspoken. And when they passed, the world barely blinked. Their armor was sold as decoration, their swords put on walls, tamed, turned into characters in plays, their pain made entertainment. What had once been sacred had become spectacle. But the truth remains, beneath the legends, beneath the cherry blossoms and moonlit duels, there were men who gave everything, and lived long enough to see that everything forgotten. Now, close your eyes. Picture samurai sitting on a quiet porch, his armor boxed in the corner, his blade resting across his lap. Not drawn, not sharpened, just resting. The wind moves through the grass. The sun is setting. The world around him is peaceful, too peaceful. He looks out at a road where no one walks, at fields that once held camps, now filled with quiet harvests. He has nothing left to serve, no lord to kneel before, no son to train, no war to die in. And so he simply sits, breathing, remembering, fading. Let that image ease into your breath. Let it settle in the stillness behind your eyes. You are not forgotten here, not erased, not out of place. You are safe, you are seen, you are held in the softness of sleep, where time cannot chase you, where purpose does not press upon your chest. Let the sword lie quiet now. Let the silence hold you. Rest, deep and gentle, like the last samurai watching the stars, knowing the war is over and peace at last has come. There is one last part of the samurai's life that few ever speak about, not because it was hidden, but because it was quiet, too quiet to notice, till it filled the entire room. The silence, not the silence of meditation or calm before battle, but the silence that came after. After the war ended, after the blade was sheathed, after the cries faded into wind and the armor was stored away. It was the silence of thoughts never spoken, pain never named, grief never shared. The samurai were not allowed to weep, not even for fallen brothers, not even for their children, not even when their own hearts broke quietly inside them. To feel too deeply was shameful, to speak too freely was dangerous, and so they swallowed their sorrow, day after day, until it hardened inside them like stone. They wrote poems instead, short verses with hidden meaning. A falling leaf, a vanishing moon, a single line about a cold wind at night. Each one a quiet cry pressed into paper. They walked slowly, even when they were young. Their movements restrained, their steps measured, their voices soft, always listening, always watching, always containing what they truly felt. Many samurai outlived everyone they loved, their wives, their comrades, their lords, but they never said the names aloud again, as if speaking them would shatter the silence they had wrapped around their memories. Some would sit by old battlefields, not to remember glory, but because that was the last place they felt anything at all. Others spent hours cleaning a sword that would never be drawn again, because the rhythm of the cloth over steel was the only comfort left to them. They were men carved into stillness, shaped by fire, and then left to cool alone, even in their homes, surrounded by family. The silence followed them. Their children feared them. Their wives respected them, but few ever truly knew them, because to know them, you would have to touch the sorrow they carried, and they had spent a lifetime making sure no one ever did. And what was that sorrow? It was the weight of lives taken, of choices made without question, of loyalties given that were never returned. It was the memory of eyes that closed forever, of orders followed without understanding, of friends buried without ceremony. It was the quiet fear that maybe all the sacrifice had meant nothing, that the world had moved on, and all that remained was a fading echo. Even in death, the silence remained. Samurai graves were simple, stones marked with names and dates, sometimes a poem, sometimes nothing. They did not ask for mourning. They did not want tears. They had forgotten what it meant to be mourned long ago. Now, close your eyes. Picture a small shrine, tucked beneath a tree on a quiet hill, a faded helmet resting at its base, wind passing through tall grass, the kind of wind that carries nothing with it, just air, just time. The world is quiet here, not because it is empty, but because it remembers. It remembers every footstep on old earth, every whisper behind closed doors, every blade drawn and sheathed again. The silence is not hollow. It is full, full of lives lived without complaint, without praise, without comfort. And now, you are here too, not as a warrior, not as a witness, but as someone allowed to rest, soft and still and deep. Let that silence hold you, not as a burden, but as a blanket. You do not need to speak or move or prove anything tonight. You are free of the blade, free of the code, free of the weight the samurai carried for centuries. Sleep now, in the hush that lives beyond sorrow, beyond duty, beyond fear. The silence is yours, and it is kind, and it is gentle, and it will carry you through the night. Now that the story has come to a close, let us sit for a while in stillness. You've walked the path of the samurai tonight, not the one painted in gold, but the one worn down by footsteps, softened by pain, and hollowed out by duty. You've seen what it truly meant to wear the armor, to carry the sword, to follow orders without question, to live without rest, and to die without fear. It was a life of honor, yes, but also of heartbreak, of silence, of choices made not from the heart, but from obligation. And while their world was distant, their struggles still echo today. The fear of failing those we serve, the need to be perfect, the weight of unspoken grief. These are burdens many still carry, though we no longer wear swords at our sides. But unlike the samurai, you have something they often did not, a choice to stop, to breathe, to lay your burdens down, even if only for a night. You are not bound by a code of silence, or by a lord's command, or by the need to prove your worth with suffering. You are allowed to feel, to rest, to be soft. The samurai could never truly escape the battles within themselves. But you can step away now, into sleep, into peace, into quiet far gentler than the kind they ever knew. So take one last breath and let the blade fall from your hand. Let the armor melt away from your shoulders. Let the silence no longer be heavy, but light, like wind passing through bamboo, like a river smooth and stone. You have walked a long road, and now you may rest. No orders remain. No voices command you. No watchful eyes demand your strength. Just the hush of your breath, the warmth of your bed, and the safety of knowing the story is done. Sleep now, warrior of stillness. The night is quiet, and so are you.